Good morning, everyone. As you are coming in, welcome to our session this morning. It is great to have you here with us. We are excited just to give you a couple of house rules as we start the process this morning. Your host this morning is Gerard Linde, and I am going to introduce him to you now. We are discussing the process that SARS follows when it comes to collecting your debt, collecting your tax debt that you owe to them. What is that process, so that you can understand it better, because it's really not well documented anywhere. So this is first-hand information that's verified by SARS. And just a couple of house rules. We are going to move through a discussion, a presentation this morning with you. We are from tax debt compliance, and at tax debt compliance, we've been in business for over 7 years now. Gerard Linde is the director of tax debt compliance. He has a master's degree in taxation from the University of Pretoria. He's a chartered tax advisor. And by the way, being a chartered tax advisor means that he's got a leading designation from the South African Institute of Taxation. This is an internationally recognized and very well respected award that is only given to individuals with technical superiority and professional integrity. So Gerard, who is hosting the session this morning, has been specializing and assisting businesses who are not compliant with SARS for over 7 years. And at tax debt compliance, we've dealt with 200,500,000 Rand in total tax debt. We've managed to reduce that tax debt down with a total tax debt reduction of 75%, which means that individuals only paid 25% of the actual tax debt owed to SARS. That's done with specialized techniques, and everything is done within the law. And the biggest tax debt reduction that was realized for a client was 97%. So tax debt compliance has a 100% success rate. None of the clients who put their trust in tax debt compliance before have lost anything due to owing tax to SARS. We are compliant when it comes to the South African tax debt laws and acts, and we will share a link with you that you can also have a look at what some of our clients are saying, and to our website that you can have a look at that. So I would like to just jump into our conversation without further ado and ask you, as we move through this, Gerard will handle questions at the end. You are welcome to type it in the chat box for us as well. We would love to hear from you, that we keep this interactive and that we can give you feedback at the end as well. So I am going to share my screen, and Gerard is going to work through the discussion with you. And please make sure that you are on mute on your side, and that you do type your questions in the chat box for us, that we can help you through the process. So Gerard, thank you so much for working through this with us this morning. We appreciate your time, and we are looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Dalian. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here this morning. We won't be very long. This is a condensed version, so just taking into account your time. This will just give you a brief overview of the understanding of the SARS debt collection processes. I'm going to jump through the slides with you, discuss the points, and then, like Dalian said, if you've got any questions or things that you wonder about, you're welcome to pop it in the message. We'll see if we can answer it here. So if you jump straight ahead into our debt collecting process, I'm just going to have a quick overview of the outline of today's session, which will cover the points of the registered contact details, the SARS initial engagement, then you jump into your final demand, That jump goes into the third-party appointment, leads to a civil judgment, and then the warrant of execution. So those are basically the steps from A to Z when it comes to the collection process. I'm just going to cover each one of them just briefly, just to see how it flows and how SARS moves from the one step to another. So if we jump down to the next slide, which is the most important point before we handle any collection process, is the registered contact details. So it's very important to take note that it's the taxpayer's responsibility to make sure that the details captured are correct and their details. You know, taxpayers can't claim ignorance if they didn't receive correspondence, if they haven't made sure that the correct details are uploaded onto the system. It's not SARS's responsibility to make sure that they can reach you. That's why sometimes you'll hear taxpayers say, well, we haven't received this file on demand, or we haven't received this correspondence from SARS, but meanwhile, you know, the details weren't updated. Sometimes the details are with old accountants or old addresses or email addresses, and this is where a bulk of the issues come from. So this is basically the most important part, is to make sure that you periodically just update your details, just make sure that you check that the details are indeed correct, because this is the details that SARS use. Now, very important that SARS's system picks up when they send you an email or correspondence, just to prove that it was delivered. So it's one of those things that, you know, how do I make sure that I did receive the correspondence, or that SARS did send it? You are entitled to ask for the proof. So SARS's system does make reference of this, that they can provide you with proof that correspondence was sent to the last address that was provided. So if there was maybe any uncertainty or unclarity, you can approach us and say, listen, just can you tell me that you did send this demand, or show me proof that you did? Because this obviously leads into the collection process to make sure that the correct process was followed. So that's the very first step, is that the collection process is delivered to the right address. So if we jump to the next one, which will start off our collection process, which we call the initial engagement. This is not documented in the Act. This is basically good faith. So it's not necessarily that SARS has to follow this process, but in some cases they would do. So if you've got debt on the system, that automatically triggers the collection steps. So that means if there's any debt that's not paid on your statement of accounts for any periods, that will put the collection process into effect. So that means that SARS, you know, you might have seen this, or it's come across your path that someone from the call center would phone you and say, listen, we see there's this debt on the system, by when can we expect payment? Now this is basically the informal engagement with you to see, can we not, how can we source the money, and by when can you pay, so that they can make a note on the system. So this can be by email or telephone or e-filing engagement. Again, they will use the details as provided. So we come back to the very first step. So if they did try to phone you and the phone number is wrong, or was not captured or amended, you know, this is the number that they'll keep on using and keep on making note on the system of. So normally it's also not, like I said, it's not provided in the Act, but what we've gathered from SARS is that they will give you 5 working days to respond to this initial engagement. Then we lead into the first official collection step, which is the file on demand. This is covered in section 179 sub 5 of the Tax Administration Act. Then if you can just jump to the next one. This is basically our final demand. So if there's no payment on the system, SARS will issue you a demand and you have 10 working days to respond. So this demand again will be issued most likely through e-filing. Sometimes the official will send you a direct email with if there is correspondence, but most likely, I suppose most of you have seen that the final demands keeps on coming through e-filing. So every now and again, when you look under correspondence on e-filing, there will be a final demand. Just an interesting note, before SARS can continue with the final demand, this is the very first step for them. So if they have this in place, that opens the gates for the physical collection of the monies from other parties. Just an interesting note that SARS can't take action if the final demand is older than 6 months. So I believe that's why you would have seen sometimes that you receive multiple final demands in a row. That's just to make sure that the final demands are captured and it's there. So when they want to take action, that it's available for them to do so. So this is also maybe a thing to take note of. If action is taken, just see when last did you receive a final demand, just for that small point, which is not always, it's not public knowledge, as I would say, in that sense. Then we jump into the very first of the collection, physical collection processes, and this is your third-party appointment. This follows your final demand. So after 10 days, if no payments made, SARS then can proceed to this third-party appointment, which is then covered in Section 179 of the TAA. That means that SARS can go to your employer, they can go to the bank, your debtors, any of those parties, and issue a demand. That third party needs to withhold money and then pay that directly to SARS. The most common one used is the bank attachment. So the bank, SARS uses the bank that is registered to your name, if it's now your personal or the business account. They'll issue a letter to the bank, and the bank will have no other option but to attach the monies from your account. So they, in some cases, you would not even know, because the banks, or it's not even, they don't have to tell you. So if SARS issues this attachment order, they will attach the monies that is in the bank available to pay over to SARS. So if you owe 50,000 Rand and there's 50,000 Rand in the account, SARS will pay, the bank will pay the full amount to SARS. If there's less, the bank will pay that amount that is there. So if it's only 10,000, so the bank will pay that 10,000 over to SARS. Just on the third party appointment, from the individual point of view, if they do issue a garnish order, they can only do it to a maximum of 25% of your salary. This is covered in PAJA. So it's just something to take note of. If there is a garnish order, just check if that is indeed less than 25%, or if it's more, then obviously you can ask for a reduction, because they cannot attach more, because how does the taxpayer, end up paying, his own bills in that time. This amount can be reduced if you do a deferment application. So obviously, if SARS will, once they've issued the garnish order, it's up to you to approach them to say, we want to apply for a deferment, and then issue your reasons and your documents if you're going to ask for a lesser amount than what is currently being attached. But we'll get to the deferment just a little bit later on, in terms of your options that you have once you are in the collection process. So if you jump to the next. So after the third-party appointment, if SARS can't source that full amount, they will approach the court for civil judgment. This is then covered in that Section 172 of the TAA. So they approach the court, they say the taxpayers are paying, so we want to engage in the civil judgment. Again, we will use the word civil, so it's not a criminal judgment, so it's a civil matter which is to do with the physical money. So you're not being prosecuted for jail time. This is just a judgment so that they can open the door, which we'll get to in a moment, about attaching your assets that is available to source and to cover the debt. Again, we're coming back to the very important point that the judgment will be delivered to the last registered address. So if it's incorrect, it's not going to be SARS's problem, because it's not their responsibility. And sometimes there is where the clients or the taxpayers miss the judgment. They'll only pick it up, later when they want to apply for finance or something, and then the system lets them know that there's a judgment pending, and then sometimes they don't even know, and then once they open up the documents, say, okay, well, it seems like there's a SARS judgment, but they had no previous knowledge of this, and most likely this is because, again, the contact details are not correct. So in this, again, we come back to the Act, makes provision, so most of them all work on 10 working days, so you have 10 working days to respond to the civil judgment notice. If you don't respond, then SARS can jump again to the next step, which opens us up for the warrant of execution, which is then covered in Section 163 of the Tax Admin Act. Again, SARS has the option to attach your, Jillian, if you can just move to the next one. It just opens up the door for SARS to attach your movables and your immovables. So most likely SARS will go for the movables, so those are the ones that is more easier to move and to sell. Just in terms of, you have to keep in mind SARS also has collection costs. So the movable assets, for argument's sake, is less of a cost to attach and to move and to sell again than your immovables, which takes time. It's a bit more cumbersome, but again, they have the option. Again, this will give you 10 working days to respond after you receive the warrant. If you do not respond, then SARS can give instruction to the sheriff. So the first one is to instruction to attach, and then the second part is to attach and remove. So it means that the first part is when you attach, the sheriff will physically come to your place, and then they'll do a write-up of the assets within the premises. So which will give SARS an indication of the worth of the goods and of the movables or then immovables. Then again, SARS can give the order if nothing is received. They can give the order to say, okay, we're gonna send the sheriff back this time to attach and remove, and this means that they will come then and they will remove the things that they've attached, which they've placed values on. So if there's a car, for argument's sake, that was attached and value attributed to, they will come and upload the car and then take to a place to store. It's obviously SARS' responsibility to store these things safely once they've taken possession, and then that goes into auction to settle the debt. So that, in short, is the whole array of collection process from A to Z. But then we come to the slide that we are on now, which is called the personal liability, which is then covered in section 155, 157, and 184. This is most likely to do with directors or members of CCs and directors of companies, where SARS might find you personally liable for the company's debt. So it's not necessary to say, it's a juristic person on its own. It doesn't. I cannot be affected. These sections make provision for SARS to see, can they not hold you personally liable for the debts of this company or the CC? So that means SARS will go through a process to see, can they find you personally liable, which has to do with, is there gross negligence? You're supposed to do what you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, or if there's fraud. So if they can prove any one of the two, SARS can go into finding you personally liable. And that means that you as a person then has to, SARS can pursue you for the debts of the company. If they can't source it through the collection steps that you said, so most likely SARS will jump through this whole collection process, try to get the money from the company. If they then find you personally liable, that means they will go from A to Z again. So again, they will start off with the final demand, and so we move through the process with you individually to see if they cannot source the debts. And that is basically the process that SARS has to follow when they come to collecting the debt from the company and the individuals. And then we're going to jump straight into our solution. So this means this is what is available to you at all times. So this is basically, how to put a stop to the collection process. And it's important to note that the steps are, available to you throughout the process. So if you're now at the final demand, or if you're at the warrant of execution, you can put a stop if you can put in one of these applications to SARS to say, this is how I can solve the debt, this is what my situation allows, and then SARS is obliged to review your application and then also submit it for a review, which can then stop the application until there is a result. So it will either be favorable and SARS accepts your proposal, or they will decline it with reasons, and then you have a chance to respond to the reasons within a time frame. And if you do not, they will just continue with the steps from where it was before. If we just look at the options that we have available, just to put a stop to this collection process, which then is your basic things are your objections and your appeals, and the suspension of payment, which I'm sure most of you are aware of. This is most likely to do with circumstances where debt arose that you do not agree with. So if you feel that the debt's overstated, or things happen, the SARS didn't allow expenses, for argument's sake, and now your debt is overstated, then it's your obligation to launch this objection or appeal. Depends on where you are in the process, with a suspension of payment. So the very important part is the suspension of payment. Objection and appeal doesn't automatically grant you a suspension. So that means that it's that rule of pay now, argue later. But the suspension is there for you, where it says that if you are going to object or have objected, you can also ask to suspend that debt until there is a result. So if you object to a certain period, SARS can then suspend the collection on that debt until there is a result. So this is very important, that it needs to be within the right frame. That means that also the suspension only, so if there is debt over multiple periods, but you're only objecting to a couple periods, so that means that you can only ask for a suspension on the periods that you object to. So if SARS grants it, they will suspend those periods that you object to, but the other periods are still liable for collection. So it's very important to just to take note on what are you objecting to and what are the periods and where is the debt located everywhere, so that you don't miss something and say, well, I thought I submitted the suspension, but the suspension only covered some of the periods. Then we come to the most common ones, is obviously where the debt is what the debt is. It's not in dispute, and how to resolve it. And that's the two very important parts in terms of the deferment of Section 167 and the compromise, basically Section 200. So those two offer you the solutions of, can I repay the debt over a period of time, or can I find a settlement solution? That was the example that the land used, the amount of debt of over 200 million, where we settled on like 50 million. That's basically the options that you have in terms of resolving that. We have a webinar covering these two a bit more in depth, just the options that are available for you now to go about it. There will be some links that you can follow if you want to listen. We've got it's on YouTube, so if you want to go and listen to that specific one, if you need some more information on especially those two that provide you the relief in terms of the act and how to go about resolving your management. So again, we can say that the mechanisms are available through any time. So if you are in a crisis, I believe some of you, most of you would have seen that you can launch a deferment application through e-filing. So basically what it means, if you owe debt less than 5 million and you apply for a deferment on e-filing for less than 6 months, most likely you'll get the agreement immediately. So that's all, the system will issue you one, no problem, you'll be covered. The issue comes in where in most circumstances the taxpayer cannot repay the debt in 6. You have to ask for longer terms, or if the debt's over 5 million, the case will be allocated to a collecting agent. So it's not automatic, so someone will have to review it. And this is where the problem comes in most likely, because this thing is just going to lie there in cyberspace, because we all know SARS is very slow taking these things into account. So it's very important that you take note of your case number. Say, according to SARS, they should be able to connect you to a collecting official if you call the call center, but we've all seen the various issues. People hold on for hours on time, and then once they get to an agent, it just cuts off, and then you have to start over. So it's a very arduous process to go through, but this is, for now, the process that you have to follow in terms of getting to someone. And that is basically the collection process in a very short nutshell. If you've guys got any questions, please feel free to ask. Any comments, we would appreciate. I believe this just gives you a good framework to understand just exactly how this SARS process works and what they need to follow. So if you can just check that the right processes are followed before they can attach monies, just so that if they don't follow the correct process, that means they could not, for argument's sake, attach monies from your account. So you can ask them to say, we believe you didn't follow the correct process, so the monies that you've attached is not correct, so we would like you to repay us the money. So in that circumstances, it can happen. So we've done it in the past, but again, it's very difficult to prove if you don't have your ducks in a row. And that is our webinar for today. So feel free, please ask your questions. Otherwise, we thank you for your time. We hope this information was very helpful to you. We would appreciate some comments, how you found the session, and we thank you for your time.
I would just like to ask, is there any questions while we are, there's the link posted already, the YouTube link in terms of the previous webinar that Gerard spoke about. Thank you. Just want to ask, is there any questions from anyone about this process that you'd like to ask Gerard right now? You are welcome. Just give a bit of time. Any questions? Okay, so while you are thinking maybe about it as well, here is the link in the chat for the website. On the tax debt compliance website, you will see there are multiple videos that can also answer your questions. You're also welcome to have a look at some of the customer or testimonials from some people that we've assisted in terms of reducing their tax debt. And you are welcome to submit questions there as well. You are also welcome to email Gerard directly. His email address is linda@taxdc. I'm also typing it into the chat box, .co.za, as it was on the previous slide as well. We will send you a video of this webinar that you also have this. And we are looking forward to answering your questions. We'd really like to ask you, let us know what you'd like to know, that we can send you information of value. So Gerard, thank you so much for this very short, concise webinar. Yeah, there's a question.
Thanks, Dalian. Gerard, just a question. I think one of the things that's currently on everybody's, well, it's on my mind, is that the public liability regarding directors and public officers, and the way that SARS are obviously, taking that route to collect debt. Have you got any advice on how we can advise our clients how to kind of, I want to say alleviate, but that might not be the correct term, but, to protect themselves from that process? Is there any way? Because, I mean, obviously, they would want to get SARS to first attack the company and then come to the public officer. Because, I mean, many times the public officer is actually somebody that is employed by the company. They actually not even a director or a shareholder.
So, like I've mentioned, so SARS has to go through the collection process for the company first. So they can't approach the public officer or the people in charge, the way SARS calls it, in terms of running the company day to day, to source the money from them. So again, they have to go through that whole process, and then they have to issue a notice of personal liability. So it's not automatic. So SARS has to issue that notice. Once you receive the notice, you have time to respond. So that means that you can give your reasons on why you are not personally liable. Now, in terms of protecting yourself, it's a difficult question, because what taxpayers and our country definitely, what the problem definitely is that cash flow is a big issue, and it only takes a small hiccup, and then that can't be paid, or pay as you earn can't be paid, because there's not enough money to do so. So there is that, because that comes back to the two things that I've mentioned. Is that one is that when SARS finds you personally liable, one is the fraud, and the next one is gross negligence. Now, the negligence part is very wide open, because what SARS says is that if you were aware that the returns, number one, needed to be submitted and be paid, that should have been done. So what they will do then is, once they look at the personal liability question, is they will say, okay, well, give me your bank statements for the periods where you haven't paid. So once you submit it, they will have a look and say, well, we'll see at the end of the month when you needed to pay your pay as you earn, or that there was money in the account, so why did you not pay us? So you chose not to pay us. So that shows us that you were negligent in that area. So that's a very gray area, because obviously then it's up to you to prove, to say, it's not like we had excess money to this whole amount and we chose not to pay. This was for business expenses on to keep the doors open and so forth. So it's a very wide open stance. So what I would suggest is that, obviously, what happens most times, that the taxpayer would, if it's not right or wrong, would instruct the tax consultant to say, well, we don't have money now, so just don't submit now, because we can't pay. The lesser of the two evils is to say, well, we'll submit, but we'll make a payment to what we can, and then the rest is basically, will be outstanding. So that would be incurring penalty and interest, of course, but at least it shows from your side is that you acknowledge the fact that you need to submit the return, number one, so you do that. And then, if at all possible, just make some sort of payment, even if it's not the full amount. So at least in that circumstance, you're trying to prove to SARS that we know we have a liability towards you, but the circumstance is what it is. We are in trouble. So that's only why we made a small payment, instead of just ignoring the whole thing. Because what we found is that we get clients, and then they come here and then they haven't submitted returns for years on years. And that comes back to the negligent part. So it's very much open for SARS to then say, well, you didn't even submit your returns, so you are wrong in that instance as well. So it makes the personal liability a lot easier for them to prove. again, it will come back to cost. So if you can present an alternative in terms of the deferment or the compromise, it makes it easier for SARS to say before they have to incur further costs, is there no way for them to recoup the money? Because it will always be about the money, number one. So that is basically the gist of how to try and mitigate as best as you can. But obviously, it's not always perfect because in our country it's difficult. Like I said, it just takes a few hiccups and then someone's in cash flow trouble.
Thank you very much for that. And then just the last question, then I'm going to bother you again. Currently, it's quite a difficult and cumbersome process to confirm, the details that SARS has got on record. Is there any smoother or better way that you're aware of? Because, I mean, obviously, in a practice, you've got numerous clients, and to go through each one and yeah, it's really difficult to ascertain what SARS has got on record and how to correct them. The first thing is to say, okay, what do you have on record? It takes a lot of time. I don't know if you've got an easy, quick access or way to do that, but that...
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, the only one is obviously the easiest one is on e-filing. If you just update your detail on that tab, which allows you to edit your own details, and that should pull through. At least you made effort from your side to say, well, we've updated the details on our system. Here's the proof, and you have not updated on your side. So if there is a disconnect there, at least you have the proof that you did update the details. Sometimes it feels like you can update your details in terms of your address and your phone number, but when it comes to the bank account, it seems like they would still want you to go into the branch itself to update the bank details, so they would not automatically update the bank. So yeah, there's still a lot of confusion with that, but I believe if you just, at least from your side, once you get a client on e-filing uploaded, just make sure the details are changed there, at least the proof is there.
Riaan, it's great to hear your voice. Thanks for the questions. Really appreciate that. Please let us know if there's any other questions. I am also attaching a link to more information and a document where you can get some questions answered. You're welcome to follow that link. And I really want to invite you. There are very few businesses with this expertise. There are very few individuals with such a passion to really assist businesses to stay in business like Gerard has. So please, on social media, you're welcome to ask questions, also via email and on the website directly. Very few businesses and accountants, in our experience, understand and know the process and how to negotiate with SARS to keep those businesses who are in debt with SARS going, to keep people in their jobs. So we're looking forward to hearing from you, to interacting with you, to adding value to you. Look out for this webinar that we'll send to you and pass it on to people that you know where it can add value. So Gerard, once again, thank you so much. Thank you for the questions. Thanks for being here. Do look out for our next webinar. We will keep you updated. Have a fabulous day, everyone. Thank you.